The spectre of terrorism has haunted the world, leaving a trail of fear and destruction. Since the 1960s, countless lives have been lost to senseless violence. The world has witnessed horrific attacks on civilians in bustling city centers and hijackings of airplanes filled with innocent travelers. The fight against terrorism demands global cooperation and unwavering resolve. We will explore the ideologies and motivations behind terrorist organizations, shedding light on the complex factors that drive individuals to embrace extremism. Furthermore, we will analyze the methods and tactics employed by terrorists, as well as the challenges faced by governments and security agencies. From war-torn regions to bustling cities, terrorism casts a long shadow. It is a threat that knows no borders, targeting people from all walks of life. The golden age of air travel was tragically marred by aircraft hijackings. Hijackings became a frequent tactic by terrorist groups to sow fear and advance political agendas. These acts shattered the illusion of safety, turning jets into potential weapons. Motives varied from demands for political prisoners released to gaining international attention. The 1970s witnessed a surge in aircraft hijackings, with terrorist groups increasingly targeting international flights. One of the most infamous incidents was the hijacking of TWA Flight 841 in 1970. It was seized by the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, who forced the plane to land in Amman, Jordan. The hijackers held the passengers and crew hostage, demanding the release of Palestinian prisoners. This incident marked a turning point in aviation security. Airports introduced metal detectors and baggage screening. As the world grappled with hijackings, a new and terrifying tactic emerged: aircraft bombings. Terrorist groups began targeting passenger jets with explosives, causing catastrophic loss of life. One of the deadliest was Air India Flight 182 in 1985. The Boeing 747 exploded over the Atlantic, killing all 329 on board. This tragedy highlighted the global reach of terrorism. The 1972 Summer Olympics in Munich, Germany, were intended to be a celebration of international peace and athletic achievement. However, the Games were tragically marred by a horrific act of terrorism. On September 5th, 8 members of the Palestinian terrorist group Black September infiltrated the Olympic Village, taking 11 Israeli athletes and coaches hostage. The world watched in horror as the hostage crisis unfolded on live television. The Munich massacre was a stark reminder that terrorism could strike anywhere, shattering the illusion of safety. As the hours turned into a day, the tension inside the Olympic Village reached a fever pitch. The terrorists issued a new ultimatum demanding safe passage to Cairo with their hostages. German authorities agreed to provide the terrorists with a plane at Fürstenfeldbruck Air Base. However, the rescue attempt went tragically wrong. In the ensuing chaos, all 11 Israeli hostages were killed. The world watched in disbelief as the Olympic Games were transformed into a scene of unimaginable tragedy. Two years after the Munich massacre, the world witnessed another horrific act of terrorism, this time targeting American and French military personnel in Beirut, Lebanon. On October 23, 1983, 2 truck bombs exploded at buildings housing US and French peacekeepers. The first bomb killed 241 American servicemen, the deadliest single-day loss for the US Marine Corps since World War II. The second bomb killed 58 French soldiers. The attacks were attributed to Hezbollah, a Shiite Islamist militant group. The bombings marked a turning point in terrorism history, showing the growing sophistication of terrorist groups. The attacks exposed vulnerabilities of Western military forces, leading to a reassessment of US foreign policy in the Middle East. The Beirut barracks bombings marked a turning point in terrorism, showing the growing sophistication of terrorist groups in the Middle East. The attacks exposed the vulnerabilities of Western military forces, leading to a reassessment of US foreign policy. The bombings and the Munich massacre remind us of the human cost of terrorism and the need for international cooperation to combat this threat. The World Trade Center, a symbol of American economic power, became the target of terrorism on February 26, 1993. At 12:17 p.m., a Ryder rental truck packed with explosives detonated in the underground parking garage of the North Tower. The explosion created a crater 6 stories deep, sending shockwaves throughout Lower Manhattan. Smoke and debris billowed from the gaping hole, engulfing the streets in chaos. The blast killed 6 people and injured over 1,000, many during the chaotic evacuation. The attack during lunchtime plunged the city into panic and uncertainty. Emergency responders rushed to the scene as the world watched in horror. Section 2. Striking the Heart of America. The 1993 World Trade Center bombing marked a turning point in American history. It was a stark reminder that even iconic symbols of American power were vulnerable. The attack exposed security vulnerabilities and highlighted the need for greater vigilance. The investigation revealed a complex web of international connections. The mastermind was Ramzi Youssef, with ties to Al-Qaeda. Youssef entered the US on a tourist visa and planned the attack. Their goal was to inflict mass casualties and cripple the economy. The attack sent shockwaves through the nation, signaling a new era of terrorism. Section 3. Terror in East Africa. On August 7, 1998, 2 massive truck bombs exploded outside the US embassies in Nairobi, Kenya, and Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. The blasts reduced the embassies to rubble and left a scene of unimaginable devastation. The attacks exposed the growing threat of Al-Qaeda and were a watershed moment in the fight against terrorism. Section 4. A global network of terror. The 1998 US embassy bombings were a watershed moment in the fight against terrorism. They demonstrated the global reach and increasing sophistication of Al-Qaeda, founded by Osama bin Laden. The bombings highlighted the group's ability to carry out coordinated attacks on multiple targets. The attacks prompted a swift response from the United States. President Clinton ordered missile strikes against Al-Qaeda camps in Afghanistan and a factory in Sudan. The bombings marked a turning point in US counterterrorism, leading to new agencies and policies. Islamic terrorism reached Britain, with radical preachers and extremist ideologies gaining ground. Abu Qatada and Abu Hamza al-Masri epitomized the threat of homegrown terrorism. The specter of Islamic terrorism reached Britain in the late 20th and early 21st centuries, as radical preachers found fertile ground among a small segment of the Muslim population. 2 figures epitomize the threat of homegrown terrorism: Abu Qatada and Abu Hamza al-Masri. They exploited the UK's liberal laws to spread their message of hate and incite violence. Abu Qatada gained notoriety for his fiery sermons at a mosque in North London, attracting disaffected Muslim youth, some of whom later committed acts of terrorism. Abu Hamza al-Masri, an Egyptian-born cleric, arrived in Britain in 1979 and gained British citizenship through marriage. He rose to prominence in the 1990s as the Imam of the Finsbury Park Mosque, which became known as a hotbed of extremist activity. Hamza, known for his fiery rhetoric and his trademark hook hand, openly supported terrorist groups such as Al-Qaeda and called for attacks against Western targets. The activities of Abu Qatada and Abu Hamza al-Masri posed a significant challenge to British authorities, who struggled to balance free speech and religious tolerance with national security. Both men were arrested on terrorism-related offences. Qatada fought deportation to Jordan, while Hamza was convicted in 2006. He was later extradited to the US and sentenced to life in prison. Section 4. A legacy of hate. The cases of Abu Qatada and Abu Hamza al-Masri highlighted the challenges of combating homegrown terrorism. These men exploited UK freedoms, showing the insidious nature of extremist ideologies. Their activities underscored the importance of international cooperation in tackling terrorism. Section 1. The bombing of Pan Am, Flight 103. On December 21, 1988, Pan Am Flight 103 exploded over Lockerbie, Scotland, en route from London to New York City. The Boeing 747 disintegrated, scattering wreckage over a wide area. All 259 passengers and crew perished, including 189 Americans. The bombing exposed the vulnerability of civil aviation to terrorism. Section 2, A Tangled Web of Terror. The investigation into the bombing of Pan Am Flight 103 was complex, involving law enforcement from multiple countries. Investigators determined the bombing was carried out by Libyan intelligence agents on orders from Colonel Gaddafi. In 1999, Libya handed over two agents, Abdel Basset al-Megrahi and Lamin Khalifa Fhimah, to stand trial. The trial concluded in 2001 with Megrahi found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. Section 3, the IRA connection. The bombing of Pan Am Flight 103 exposed the links between Libyan intelligence and the IRA. The IRA, fighting for a united Ireland, used violence and terrorism. In the 1980s, the IRA received weapons, funding and training from Libya. This support enabled numerous attacks in Northern Ireland and Britain. Libya's support for the IRA raised questions about future attacks. Seeking peace in Northern Ireland. The bombing of Pan Am Flight 103 had a profound impact on the peace process. It underscored the futility of violence and the need for peace. The Good Friday Agreement in 1998 marked a historic turning point. The migrant boat crisis, a humanitarian disaster. The 21st century has seen a surge in global migration due to conflict, poverty, and climate change. Desperate individuals risk their lives seeking safety and a better future. The migrant boat crisis is one of the most harrowing aspects of this situation. Thousands embark on perilous journeys across the Mediterranean Sea. Ruthless traffickers exploit migrants using overcrowded and unseaworthy vessels. These journeys are fraught with danger, lacking basic safety equipment. Shipwrecks and engine failures result in a staggering loss of life. The migrant boat crisis is a humanitarian disaster and a stark reminder of the human cost of exploitation. The international community has failed to address forced migration. Many flee war-torn countries, facing persecution and violence. Others escape extreme poverty, seeking a better future. Desperate migrants are exploited by criminal networks. Traffickers charge exorbitant fees, leading to debt bondage. Conditions on these boats are appalling and unsanitary. The migrant boat crisis is a complex challenge, demanding a coordinated response from the international community. Addressing the root causes of forced migration, such as conflict, poverty, and climate change, is crucial to stemming the flow of migrants. Cracking down on human trafficking networks and bringing those who profit to justice is essential. The migrant boat crisis is a global challenge that requires a global response. Countries must share the responsibility for providing refuge to those fleeing persecution and violence. This includes safe and legal pathways for migration, such as resettlement programs and humanitarian visas. The crisis is a reminder of our shared humanity and responsibility to protect the vulnerable. It is a call for compassion, action, and a commitment to safety and dignity for all. The rise of transnational criminal organizations, or TCOs, has been alarming. These entities exploit globalization and weak governance to amass power and wealth, engaging in drug trafficking, human trafficking, arms smuggling, cybercrime, and money laundering. They threaten national security, economic stability, and human rights. TCOs thrive in environments with weak law enforcement, corruption, and poverty, often forging alliances with corrupt officials and infiltrating institutions. Their profits are laundered and reinvested in further criminal activities. The convergence of crime, terrorism, and state sponsorship has created a dangerous landscape. TCOs have forged alliances with terrorist groups, providing funding and support. Some TCOs engage in terrorist acts, blurring lines and challenging law enforcement. The nexus is often fueled by state sponsorship. Rogue states support criminal organizations and terrorist groups for strategic objectives. Combating transnational organized crime requires a coordinated response from the international community. Law enforcement and intelligence agencies must work together to dismantle criminal networks and bring those responsible to justice. This requires enhanced cooperation and information sharing across borders. Developing innovative strategies and technologies is crucial to counter TCOs. Addressing underlying conditions like governance and corruption is equally important. Promoting the rule of law, reducing poverty, and providing alternative livelihoods are key. International cooperation and development assistance support these efforts. The fight against transnational organized crime is a shared responsibility. It demands a collaborative approach involving governments, international organizations, and citizens. By disrupting criminal networks and promoting sustainable development, we create a safer world. Raising public awareness about the dangers of transnational organized crime is essential. International cooperation is crucial in combating these threats. The October 7, 2023 Hamas attack. The world watched in horror as the Israel-Gaza conflict escalated dramatically with a massive, multi-pronged terrorist attack by Hamas. The assault targeted Israeli civilians and military personnel, exposing gaps in Israel's security. The day began with a barrage of rockets, sirens wailing as residents rushed for cover. Hundreds of militants infiltrated Israeli territory through tunnels, by land and by sea. Armed with assault rifles and grenades, Hamas fighters stormed Israeli communities engaging in combat. Horrific scenes emerged from towns like Sderot and the kibbutz of Beirut. The October 7th attacks remind us that terrorism remains a clear and present danger in the 21st century. The international community condemned the attacks, expressing solidarity with Israel and its right to defend itself. The attacks also highlight the complex nature of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The fight against terrorism demands global cooperation and a comprehensive approach. Addressing the root causes of extremism is essential. Countering hate narratives and strengthening nations' capacities are crucial. While military and intelligence efforts are essential in dismantling terrorist networks, the fight against terrorism cannot be won on the battlefield alone. It requires a whole-of-society approach, engaging communities, religious leaders, and educators. Websites like Memory raise awareness about the threats posed by radical ideologies. By promoting dialogue and fostering critical thinking, we can prevent the spread of hatred and violence. The fight against terrorism is long and arduous, but we cannot afford to lose. Security services and law enforcement work tirelessly to keep us safe from terrorism. They deserve our unwavering support and gratitude. It is easy to become complacent in times of peace. The October 7th attacks showed terrorism can strike anywhere, anytime. We must remain vigilant and engaged. By supporting security services and promoting tolerance, we can create a safer world.